Hi.
Hi.
Like we've been talking for so many years, and today we decided to put on headphones and talk, which puts a spin to things because I hear my own voice. Now I don't understand. How do you listen to me for all this time?
How do you listen to yourself?
I haven't. Now that I put headphones on, I want to listen to others.
Okay.
I told Michal the other day that I feel so blessed that, I'm starting something new and I need who's going to show up, people that I'm friends with or
your tribe.
I'm like the first 5. It's like, wow, like it's humbling that you said yes and he said yes and then the next few just said yes. It's like really, really cool. What's worth putting on camera? What's worthy of a conversation that's shared?
Anything and everything that comes from the heart enters into the heart.
The first thing that comes to mind is like a question. Maybe you can share your thoughts and wisdom around this. So I remember way back when you were my therapist and I would share with you, certain parts of my life or stories of things in my life. And I never felt like you looked down at me. And I was amazed because I would look down at myself, like certain choices I made.
We all do.
So how's that work? Like there is the distinction between agreeing with someone and accepting someone. And I was always amazed how you can accept someone even you clearly disagree. I think today you still do. Like you can disagree with me and I'll know you disagree, but I don't feel less accepted. And I think people have a hard time with that. Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So a couple things. Number one, I think it's really important to me. It's all about being mavdil, being kodesh l'chol. Like what's mine and what's not mine. What's mine to take care of and to think about and to judge and what's not. Certainly somebody else's way of life or what they believe, that belongs to them. It doesn't belong to me. That, I think, plus putting Byron Katie's work into practice it really took away the judgment because I realized I had no right to judge anybody except myself. And even then, I had to judge myself in such a way that it would be productive.
Oh, so, right. So even the judgment that's left, right? We have judgment in Jewish life. Sure. There's a time for judgment, but a productive kind of judgment.
Right.
So when I would share with you, even today, something that you don't necessarily agree with,
right.
What you've learned to do is to just not basically to mind your business.
Exactly.
It's interesting because people's spirituality or ashkafis is such a personal thing.
Right.
Yet it became such a common measure of who they are and what they stand for. While I don't know, it's probably both. It does make a statement how I am, I guess, spiritually. What I put out spiritually, how I behave. On the other hand, it's so personal, like my relationship with Hashem and my growth with Hashem.
Right.
So that's been really cool. The way you've always the way you always do that. Like the most you've done is you've been quiet. Like you didn't say anything. Then I knew I'm in trouble.
Okay.
But I never felt not accepted, and that's cool.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
It probably is really helpful in relationships. Like when people argue, it's like, what can I accept and disagree at the same time, and how do I do that? How does one practice that?
I'd say that the practice is 24/7.
How?
It never stops. Because I have to keep going from the old place of first response to the new place of a second response. And I know this so well. I've been doing this for 40 years. So I can't judge anymore. Like it doesn't even come up.
So your second response would be to mind your business or to not judge. That goes for anything. If it's a client or if it's a family, anything. Just anywhere. Exactly. It's to go from the judgment response. So why do people have this initial response of judgment, if even it's so not productive? Like,
why do they have it? It's just a natural It's a natural part of living. We do have a lower brain. If we don't want to have this judgment, we could have an operation and have the lower brain cut out. But that doesn't really. Then we become robots because we have no feelings.
Right.
So the place, it hits us in the heart first. I think physiologically it hits us first in the heart and then in the head. So if we can, that's why it's moach shalit ala lev, but you still have to have the lev. That's the part that people forget. Yes, it's moach shalit ala lev, but get first in touch with the lev and see what's going on, become aware, become accepting of whatever you're feeling. because everybody has a right to anything they're feeling. Just read another book it's an old book called The Right to Feel Bad.
Wow.
So, yeah.
You know what you hit me with? Books that the title is so good, I don't need to read the book.
Exactly. I want to do therapy. I just want to write a little book about book titles that can just get you well.
That's awesome. There's this book you gave me a couple of years ago, and the title is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Right.
I never found a reason to read the book.
Oh, that's true.
I did start reading it.
Right.
It's phenomenal.
Sure.
But I'm like, how can you top that title?
Exactly. So the titles are stupendous, like The Disease to Please. I never knew I had a disease, but then I realized, yes, I have the disease to please. Once I recognized it as a disease, it was like, okay, I could get out of this, I think.
Right. So
The Right to Feel Bad, it's a wonderful book. It's an old book from the 80s about... We have so pathologized all the feelings, and we want perfect lives, and we want to strive for perfection, when really we have every right in the world to feel anxious and depressed and moody. And instead of pathologizing everything, to be able to be aware and accept it is a huge step forward. And they were making the point that if Abraham Lincoln lived nowadays, he'd probably be in a mental institution because he was so depressed.
What is going on with the world? Do you see? Is it different, really? Because I'm not here long enough to know if it's actually a wave of so much anxiety. I mean, in my life, I've never been as anxious as I am, while I've never did as good as I am.
Right.
So I'm like I wake up, I'm like, my life is horrible. 5 minutes later, no, it isn't. I'm just feeling things.
Right.
What's actually happening to how do you see it? Is it actually worse than it used to be?
I think
are we better off than we were?
I think in a way it's better because there's more space for feelings. But on the other hand, if those feelings are not channeled properly, then it just turns into narcissism. And a person is sitting in their mud all day long. Their mood, their mud, whatever.
Right. So at which point is it turned into narcissism? Like at what point is my feelings turns into
when it's no longer productive. When you can't move forward because you're held hostage by your feelings.
So on one hand, the world came to a place where feelings is a thing.
Right.
And it was different once because I talk to people that are older than I am, and they talk about the 70s. It seems like there was a lot of seeking back then.
Well, I'm talking about earlier than the 70s. And just visiting my cousin now, who's sitting Shiva, he also had the same feeling. No one talked about emotions back then. It's just mostly survive, be independent, think for yourself, and leave the house already.
Right.
So
Work
at 18,
hard.
18, I left the house.
Right.
I had no clue what I was doing, but I just left the house because that's what I was supposed
meant
to do. Right.
Right.
Yeah, be independent.
So that was the goal. The goal was to be strong and to be capable.
Exactly.
Because the world stepped into an era of capability, of invention, of creation. First with factories, later with technology or whatever, and medicine, and just everything was so the purpose was to go out and do.
Right.
And now the world is like slow down
and feel. Right.
And that causes a whole bunch of other problems.
Exactly. It depends. If it's not held properly, if it's not directed properly, it can just mean.
So it's directed. There has to be I feel and. There has to be I'm noticing that I'm feeling and.
Right.
If there is no and, it ends up being a whole other hellhole.
Yep.
I know for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So what?
So I have a 3A club, my AAA club.
Okay.
It's be aware of your feelings. 2 is accept whatever you're feeling. Stop downing yourself and judging. And 3, then you can act.
Aware, accept, and
act.
Nice.
Like that?
That's new.
Okay,
what was the ATM?
At this moment.
At this moment.
Right. At this moment, I'm doing the best I can. How do I know?
So that's part of accept.
That's part of accept.
So accept is at this moment.
At this moment, this is reality.
And how do I know? Because that's what it is.
That's what it is.
And not fighting reality is the first step to start.
Well, the first step is really the awareness.
I'm a good student.
You are. The first step is really the awareness because we spend so much time on automatic, eating, whatever we do, dressing, working, going to the store, it's on automatic. And the idea is, so I have another one for you. The idea is to be in the now, N-O-W.
Okay.
Now spell N-O-W backwards.
W-O-N.
What does that spell?
A 1.
Then you're a 1. Then you've won.
Wow.
You've won. When you're
So
in the
now is
now,
one.
you've won. If you're in the past or the future, you're either going to be, upset, depressed, anxious, something not so good. Past and future.
So I remember when I read Eckhart Tolle, probably 10, 12 years ago,
Yeah.
and it hit me. Like I started looking at the world, and it's a new world. I've never seen the world this way.
Right, because that's an awareness.
Right. And the way he has his way of teaching or speaking or being.
Yeah.
And it literally he represents now. And for a while, that was the practice, like stay in this moment and millisecond this moment and like really working on scraping away the past and future.
Right.
And at some point, or like today, this moment, I don't know if I'm on track or off track. I don't know. And that's how it works. Like what starts happening that the now holds more than the now. Like in this moment, I do have worries and I can't fight it. So part of being in the now is like, okay, I'm holding, like I'm letting myself be not in the now.
Right.
Is that?
Yeah. It's always duality in this world. Always
so it can
duality. That's my reasoning for the why. Why does Chumash start with a base, Bereshis? Why not with an aleph? Because I think Hashem is giving us a message. It's all duality here, folks. It's black and white. It's up and down, good and bad, moody, not moody. It's past, present, future. We get all mixed up in the duality, which is part of the Gashmias world. So here we are, souls, holy souls that come to this world enclosed in some kind of a Gashmias whatever apparatus, and we're supposed to work this duality? It's almost impossible.
What do you mean work this duality? Like we're supposed to get rid of the duality?
Not get rid. You can't.
Right.
Accept it, make space for it, and negotiate it in such a way that you come out feeling more one.
Right. With what? With both.
Exactly.
So for me to be in the now very often will mean accepting where I'm not.
Right. There's a line from a poem by Rudyard Kipling. The poem is called If. It's my favorite poem in the world. It was my father's favorite poem. And there's a line that says, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same.
Right. That's a place to be.
That's a powerful place to be.
Right.
Why are they imposters? I'll interview you. Why are they imposters?
Right, because it's away from emes. Any opposites.
Correct.
Any pull, any tug is away from emes.
Not only that, whatever we think is a failure could eventually be very positive, and whatever we think is really a triumph could really be a disaster.
Right. Which is it's a trick. Like the Gashmias world, the world as we know it is a trick. And anyone that's willing to look into themselves and really, really look deeper will find there is that book, Radical Forgiveness.
Yes.
And it's like he really I think it's a 12-step process. Like, you know how they have 4 steps?
Right.
I think his is a 12-step to get but it's gonna take some steps to like see everything as a soul. Like my soul actually asked for this.
It's really one step. Really one. Let's boil it down. Why 12? Why 4? I
don't know if it's 12, but
it's just an awareness that what I think is the bad could really be good. What I think is the good could really be bad, and be able to be someplace in the middle there. So I'm not going to get knocked off my place so easily.
I can just be the presence of whatever it is that's in front of me. So if it's anxiety or growth, just be humbly in the presence of what it is. Yeah. Like many times, I would get on a call with you and like talk about my big drama, and the answer would be, your thought would be like, it's not all about you. Like,
did I say that?
Yeah.
And how did you take that?
I mean, it worked.
Okay, good.
It worked.
Good.
Like I know sometimes my, like the guidance and the people I surround myself with knocks me out because I don't necessarily like it. I want it like dramatized more or like, less capable for that moment. But ultimately it's truth, and truth will hit.
Right.
And it's not mine and it's not yours. It's ours. It's the world's truth.
Right.
It's
and the
one
funny
truth.
thing is that whatever is the most challenging for us is really our mission. Mm-hmm. That's what I've found. Kind of goes along with personality theory, but so wherever you find the challenges, that's the wake-up call.
Right.
So if the wake-up call is to feel better about yourself, because you're not feeling good about yourself. That's the challenge of
So
the
that's
moment.
literally meant that's what's needed.
Exactly.
And individually and I guess collectively the people around me. I guess that's what they need. I'm not thinking of a healing coaching way. I'm thinking of practically. Like if I feel insecure, it's very likely, and I work through it, very likely someone else feels the same and doesn't know yet that it's okay.
Yeah.
I find a lot of, I come across a lot of people that literally think what I think, and they still think it's not okay, or it's weird, or it's wrong, or there's something wrong with them. And I don't think so anymore.
Right. Because once you take away the would, should, and could from your life, it's a whole other life.
Right.
Whole other
would have, should have, could have. I should be different than I am, which is.
And if only this had happened, I could have been different. Or if I only wouldn't have done that, I also, would. Again, it's such a natural part of who we are. It's the job of this lower brain, of this amygdala, of our dramatic brain. It's the job to hijack the upper brain, where we have some godliness and we feel, oh yes, I truly am a chelek Elokam Imal. How do I manifest that in my life? I can't if I'm constantly being hijacked by the lower brain.
Right, but I'm always going to be somewhat.
But I'm always going to be right. It's like 80-20. I use that statistic.
Which one is 20? 20 lower brain?
20 lower brain.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not in 20 lower brain. My lower brain has way more.
So
I think so, at least. Like, I think that I'm... Wow, that's a good goal.
Well, why am I using that number? Do you know why?
Why? Mitzrayim?
That's right.
20%
20% of Yidden left. And 80% were lost in the plague of darkness.
Right.
And the word shachach and choshech are the same.
So choshech means forgetting.
That's right. What do you forget?
So all it takes to leave the 20, like the lower brain, the limited smallness, is to remember.
Remember what?
Godliness, I guess.
That's right.
The good stuff.
That's right.
That I'm okay, that I'm safe unconditionally,
Right.
which is a tough one. Like the unconditional safety, emotional safety and well-being must be something unconditional. Otherwise, it isn't safe.
And by the way, there aren't a lot of people that we find in our lives who really are safe for us. So like people think you have to have like whole groups. No, sometimes you have one or two people in your life and that's it. And that's enough.
Yeah,
actually.
I think the other day I had a conversation with someone. I don't remember if it was on a podcast or not. I don't keep track anymore. But the other day we had a conversation that community, the power of community, but really how many people is a community these days? Like, and how valuable is 100 people community or 1,000 versus a 5 people community?
Right, exactly.
Or a 10 people community. Or like 3 little communities, one for davening, one for family, and one for like emotional wellness. Like 3 little communities does really, really well over 1,000 people community where I get really lost.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's like one self-endorsement is worth 1,000 endorsements from outer environment. Because you can have everyone tell you how great you're doing and you can still feel pretty rotten. The minute you begin to self-endorse...
It becomes an addiction for other people to tell me how good I am.
Yeah,
It's just another addiction. But the moment I'm telling myself I'm good, it could start sticking. Yet it needs the other, so it needs both. I think that the friends I surround myself with, the support I surround myself these days, are people that remind me that I tell myself that I'm good.
Okay,
like
sounds good to me. It's healthy.
Like,
it's healthy.
It's like not that it's their task to help me feel good, and it's not that I can do it alone. It's that they support me supporting myself.
Right.
Which is for me a nice balance.
So how come it is that it's 20 upper brain, 80 lower brain? Why? Because
20 upper, 80 lower.
Yeah, only 20. Only 20% of people want to do the work. They want to heal. They want to do the work that's necessary for the healing, and the 80% fall through the cracks or give up on themselves way too early in the process, and they're so used to. Depending on the personality and the age, they're so used to this habit, the addiction of the negative thinking, that it's really hard for them to see the opposite.
It's really rough. Like people that want and they have the awareness and they can't get themselves out.
Yeah.
It's really rough because seeing the light and feeling it here and there, but not being able to. So what's the message for them? For the ones that really want and have a level of clarity of well-being of peace?
I would say, first of all, they need to attach to people who do believe in them, because they need the support, and then they have to have the tools. We are born without tools. We're born into families that have absolutely no tools, all of us. But that's just the first 15, 20 years of our lives, and then what do we do for the next 100 years? So
that's a really nice way of looking at trauma.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it.
Like childhood trauma.
Yeah,
that's a really cool way of looking at it.
So usually I take a piece of paper and I fold the bottom corner. That's first 20 years. But now we have another 100.
Wow.
What are we going to do with these 100?
So how I'm going to raise myself the other 80 years is,
we get
again,
2 chances.
80-20.
Yeah, we get 2 chances. The family that we're born into and how we develop, and then how we develop ourselves after that with all that we've been given.
Right. Yeah, I once heard like the purpose of a parent being loving is so I can grow up and be loving. Mm-hmm. So if a parent wasn't loving, I still need to be loving.
Correct.
So the purpose of safety, emotional, like a child to be safe, is so I grow up and make it safe. Okay, so okay, so I wasn't. If someone wasn't given safety for the now that I'm an adult, it's time to provide safety.
There's another book title that I can mention. It's called. This is about book titles. Invisible Heroes.
Okay.
What's an invisible hero?
What?
You are an invisible hero. So am I. Because we've all been through trauma. We've all been through a lot of stuff in our lives, and yet we choose. From the upper brain, we choose to live our lives differently now. Mm. And it's usually invisible. Nobody knows what we've gone through or what we've had to endure. That's why it's invisible heroes.
Right.
So when you think of yourself as a hero, what does that do immediately?
Strength. Mm-hmm. Because the hero is strong.
Yeah.
And the hero prevails.
Right.
And keeps going.
Right. And
The Hero's Journey, another book title. The Hero's Journey.
Oh, many of them, many. I don't want to give you a preview into my book about book titles.
Let's not give it all away.
No.
Okay, the other thing that I hear a lot that I'm at really in my life, and I think I messaged you this beforehand that I want to ask you about.
Go ahead.
It's like changing careers, or like moving to a different parnasa and so on. So I remember when you shared with me that you went to school in your 40s, I think?
48. I got my bachelor's in my 20s, and I taught for 25 years. And I love teaching. That's my style.
What you teach?
Everything.
Like English?
Kodesh, Chol. I taught everything. From kindergarten to adult education. I love teaching. It's my style. I'm a real bossy second child in my family, first girl, real bossy. So I love teaching. And what happened was, after around 25 years, I realized that I had to go much deeper because I wanted a more personal relationship. I didn't want a whole class.
With people?
With people.
Wow.
And I had already been involved with my sister developing the whole Emmet method.
That was before you went to school for
that
therapy?
That was before. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what is it like? Like you're not like 20 going to college. You're in your 40s
that first
going
night,
to college.
I know, that first night.
Wait, you sat in classes?
I sat in
40.
Yeah, 48.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I was scared. And
you remember going into class?
I remember the first time I went into the class, and I said, how am I going to do this? All these kids are so much younger than me, and I'm going to feel so out of it. And my impression after that first class was, excuse my French, if these pictures can do it, so can I. And then actually, in one class on CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, the teacher asked me to explain the whole Emmet method. So I taught the class.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I had my foundation for going to school. Everything I based on
And you
Emmet.
practiced one-on-one already with people?
No.
You did work?
Here and there.
A little.
Yeah.
Right.
But at least I had the foundation, so whatever I was doing in school fed that foundation.
Wow. And you stopped working right away, or you
then
did
I stopped.
both?
Yeah, it was very hard because I was teaching in a cheder in Chicago, and they said, how can you leave teaching? And I said, I have to, and that's all. It was very hard because I'm such a people pleaser. I did have that disease, and it was quite a challenge.
Wow.
And I had no idea what would happen. People
it's
told
not
me if
like-
I didn't become a social worker, I should go into social work. So I didn't.
And what are you? What's the?
It's counseling psychology. I didn't like the whole idea of social work and dealing with organizations I didn't want. I just wanted the one-on-one intensity,
Wow.
which I got.
And then when you told this to the people that knew you,
They had a hard time.
They had a hard time.
Very hard.
And that's common.
Oh, yeah. When you want to
Like-
make a change, take a look at the word. She knew it. You want some more? What's the word for tooth? Shane.
Shane.
Yeah, same roots. Like making a change is like pulling a tooth.
She knew it, Shen.
But if you don't make the change, then you're Shena, then you're sleeping. Right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. You had any kind of support, like people that told you to do that or pushed you to do that?
Not really.
Wow.
Nope.
And
I
then
lived my life pretty independently without support.
Wow. And you had you started a private practice right away?
Then I started 2 years later
Where was that?
in Chicago.
Wow. And you went to school in Chicago?
Yeah, yeah.
And you first worked for an agency or something?
No.
Oh, right away? You stopped teaching?
I had to get some hours, so I did work for an agency, but then I just went into private practice.
Wow.
But by then I already connected with groups all over the world. I was
From Emmett.
from Emmett, right,
Wow.
because I was training leaders and teaching them how to, how the process of the group works. So I already had people that I knew and who were calling
So
me
the
for certain...
network for you was the Emmett network,
Exactly.
and then it became.
Yeah.
Right. You shared with me once a story that at one point, since you were self-employed, and
Mm-hmm.
whenever you had a slow, less of a wave of clients, you would write up a letter to leaders or
Right.
whatever and tell them I'm a therapist, I live local, my office is here, and then you would send out the letter as a stadlis,
Right.
and then. So you shared this with me, I think during a wave, like of a slow wave of clients. It
right.
was like 10 years ago or so. And you're like, guess what? I did my stadlis. And you know what else happened? I have clients, but none of them came through my letters.
So you never know.
So there's something about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
There's something to be said about putting in effort and then where does the
Exactly.
result come?
And
Sometimes it comes
and
from,
sometimes you don't see it. It reminds me, my my sister was telling me, what was she talking about? Rachel and Leah. So what did Leah want most in her life?
Mm-hmm.
She wanted Yaakov's love,
right.
right? Where's she buried?
Where?
Right next to him.
Right.
What did Rachel want most in her life?
Kids?
Yeah. And what do we call her now? Mama Rachel.
Wow. Oh, wow. I felt that. Wow.
I thought you would. So talking about Hishtadlis and talking about where does it all end up, look at Rachel and Leah.
It's pretty wild how we
It is.
self-manifest, create our own
Yeah.
limitations, our own dreams.
It's also pretty wild how much we limit ourselves because of the duality of the brain and the fight that goes on inside constantly. Should I? Shouldn't I? That whole, the doubt is really such an
So
amalgam
someone
for us.
wanting to create a change for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I know in my change process is really slow. I'm like, it's also like,
How do you know it's
I'll
that's a judgment? Excuse me.
I agree.
Really slow.
It's true. And also depends on who says it, right?
yeah.
Someone else will say, oh, wow. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's true. But really, I know what sometimes slows me down. It's like an insecurity, but it's a humility insecurity in a sense. It's like if I say yes to everything, what stands in my way of like keeping myself in check?
Right.
So part
Right.
of my...
The
of
ego
my,
is the
right,
ego
right.
learning how to balance itself.
Right.
Got it.
Because I can just say yes to everything. I mean, I don't know if I could, but theoretically,
Right.
like, I don't necessarily always want to be the yes, and just go at things 1,000 miles an hour and,
Sure.
and break anything that's on my way.
Sure.
I like sometimes
No,
the
there
slow
has to
process.
be balance, of course. Everything has to be with some kind of a shear, with some kind of balance.
Right.
Otherwise, it's not going to be lasting.
Right. So I can think, oh, it's slow, but really it's proper, maybe.
I don't look at you. I don't look at you as slow at all. Like you're like, let's go.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
So again, accepting that duality is the hardest place in the world.
So slow and fast. Everything has the two opposites
yeah,
to it.
Yeah.
Right.
So when people say, I could never do that, I ask, do you ever say, maybe I could do that? So if we don't have the balance and we're always doing the negative, how do we get a chance to experience anything positive?
Right.
Like
So
somebody's telling me she can't drive. Really? Why can't you drive? Oh, no, I'm too scared to drive. Try saying it the opposite. Try saying the opposite of that remark.
even in words first. Maybe I could
maybe
drive.
I
I could
could.
try to drive.
Maybe I could.
Right.
So already you're waking up the brain and you're creating new neural pathways between the I can't and maybe I can.
Right. So it can start with either, like there's machshava, dibra, maisa.
Exactly.
So it could be a switch in machshava, which triggers new words, which triggers new actions. And it could sometimes be, oh, I did that. I don't even know how and why. And now my thinking is different.
Yeah.
But both need to coexist, like my positive thinking with my positive doing, which result
all
in...
three. It really has to be all three. It has to be thought, speech, and action. If it's just one, it's not gonna work.
Stick.
No,
either, because if I'm only doing, then I'm not like it's just that's the part that I don't like.
Right.
Like
if I'm angry and I'm washing the floor on my hands and knees because I'm so angry and I'm thinking I'm getting out all my anger, I'm going to be just as angry when I'm done washing the floor. I'll have a clean floor, but I'll still be angry.
Right.
But if I'm washing the floor and thinking a different thought and saying different words to myself,
it's gonna stop.
Correct.
Which is how feelings work. It's like feelings have this way of working. Like if it's held and suppressed, it just keeps hitting.
Correct.
But as soon as it's given space or words or a moment and a thought and a word, it just tends to leave.
Well, it's also important to understand that there is absolutely no control over feelings. People are always trying to control their feelings.
A lot of people argue with that. Like not necessarily my circle, but when I introduce some of my, like I'll sit at a random table and try to throw my 2 cents at things, then I'm like, just be quiet.
Why?
Like, because people like put up what do you mean you're angry? Don't be. Or like, what do you mean you're do it, don't do it. Like, it seems just like sometimes I'm met with so much resistance to the way I think and believe by either a generation or a mindset that are very much that mindset, like go out and be independent and just conquer, and like the conquer mindset, which is, I think it's needed, right? Like it's needed to have the conquer mindset. Just stop, stop it. Right?
Yeah.
It's needed. The stop it is needed.
Sure, sometimes.
What was it, Bob?
Yeah, Bob Newhart. Stop it.
Like YouTube, Bob Newhart.
Right.
It's so like it's needed. And for me, it's like needed after I didn't. First I allow and then I stop.
But I think where people get very stuck is they really try to control what's going on in the lower brain. The machshava, dibur, and maisa that we're talking about is only in the executive part of the brain. The prefrontal cortex. That's the only place where there is any kind of influence or control. Otherwise, I am really a victim to my emotions. Of course,
right.
If I'm anxious about something at that moment that I'm not aware and I haven't accepted it, then I'm just still down there. But the minute that I'm aware and I say, "Wait a minute, maybe I can do something different. I can change one thought, just one." Because I know they say you can only have one thought at a time.
Right.
I thought you could have many more, but it's really true. Only one thought at a time, one word, one action, and then I'm already into a different place.
I moved from that's the emet. Like the emet that would be there's a circumstance, and then 2 would be there's an automatic response to it, which is lower brain.
Right.
And then if it's something that's not productive or functional or helpful or keeps me down, then step 3 would be like, how do I make one choice, one word, one breath, one something?
Right.
And as soon as I did a 3, I'm out of that auto response.
So people very often ask me, so how long does it take to do this change?
Yes, it's a really good question.
2 weeks.
Really?
Yeah. 2 weeks to begin to be aware.
So I am slow.
Now you're there already. To begin to be aware, and then to take responsibility, not to be the victim anymore, but to be the victor. This is victim stuff, and this is always victor. Once I make a choice, I am the victor.
Right.
That's really hard.
2 weeks of what? Like
of doing this nonstop.
Redefining my life?
Yeah, or it could take 2 months.
Or just of a breath. Just look at change, just to relax.
Well, the breath, to me, when you talk about machshava, dibur, and maisa, the maisa can just be taking a breath. It's enough.
Right.
It already begins the change.
Right.
Because you can only take a breath in the moment, in the now. Can't take a breath for yesterday or for tomorrow.
Right.
So automatically, neshima is breath. It just reminds you that you have a neshama.
Right.
It reminds you that you have soul powers that you can put into practice now.
Right. So the neshima is is the connection, the link between the thought and the body, which is the maisa.
Right.
So one breath is
breath does it.
Yeah, but I think recreating a life takes a couple of years. Like you say that, you told me that, like a plan, like a long-term plan and a short-term plan. Like it's like...
Look, it never stops. It's
like
till 120.
Right.
It's a continual... I always say this world is one big yeshiva. All we do is learn here. All we do is learn for 120 years. And when we stop learning, that's where the setbacks occur.
Right. And aging happens.
Yeah. And aging happens, right?
Right. Yeah, there's like breathwork became so like mainstream now. There's so much like wisdom that happens through breath. Like not in doing and just being.
Of course.
Like
that's why we're called human beings and not human doings.
Right.
But most people, myself included, spent most of my life being a human doing. And the question is, who am I if I'm not doing?
Like, how do I value myself?
Right.
What do I think of myself?
Right.
Right. So the breath seems to like link a lot of things. It links. It just keeps like an exhale is letting go. Exhale is like relaxing. Inhale could be strength, or the other way. It could be either way. You know, like the time I spent with Rabbi Penson and his like shiurim.
Yes.
Like he had like techniques. Do you know what's interesting to me? That like I find books or teachings that are secular. He would teach us this stuff straight out of a sefer, like reading it out in Hebrew. Yeah. So he would be like, there's inhale from the right nostril, chesed and gevurah, right nostril, left nostril, and both. Yeah. And mouth breaths, nose breaths, and all reading it out of Sfarim. It was so cool.
It's Hasidus, basically. It's really basic Hasidus. I mean, the Alter Rebbe talked all the time about machshava, dibur, and maisa, and different parts of the brain, different parts of the heart. So, so you're not frozen anymore, right?
No, unfrozen. Totally unfrozen.
What happened?
I don't know. I think I went in, I got lost in the thought of myself or something. And now I'm
so back. Doesn't that help to be in the moment and accept that?
Yeah, totally.
Without any judgment?
It's very valuable to allow myself to be that and not get anxious about it and not even edit it out, like leave it in. It's totally. Okay, the other thing that I think that I want to like ask you or pick your brain a little is Yiddishkeit. Judaism, Yiddishkeit.
That's an easy one for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm a Balas Tshuva. I had a chance to choose. I feel very sorry for people who are born from birth.
Thanks.
You have my Rahmanas. But
so the truth is, I think that there's a lot of unspoken of what people go through inside, and I think that almost anyone that as soon as they have that struggle, they have again the choice. And if they're not kidding themselves, they actually have a choice.
Right.
And maybe if they share it with one person, it would help. So they actually feel like they have a choice.
Look, I think the neshama is always looking for truth in this world. That's the nature of the neshama. So for 36 years of my life, I was wandering around looking for authenticity, looking for truth, looking for stability, something eternal. Didn't find it.
What was it like being secular? Like, what was it?
Confusing.
College?
Yeah. Scary. Very confusing, very not knowing what am I doing here, and not able to answer any questions, any deep questions. Where am I going? What am I doing? And what's the whole purpose? I was even suicidal at one point, and I got very depressed.
Like a lack of purpose?
A lack of purpose. Because here I'm brought up in a home that's all about mission. My father, Olav Shalom, was all about mission, trying to save the Jews in the Holocaust, trying to save Eretz Yisrael from the Arabs, always trying to save. So all of us became very mission-oriented. All of us siblings kind of have that shtel. And then when it didn't attach to anything real, then it just all fell apart.
So to you, Yiddishkeit, or you're like, Yiddishkeit is a way to attach myself
it's the vehicle. It's the holding place, the vehicle in which I found my truth and learned enough and because it was all through books and teachers and questioning a lot and fighting with the whole system that I came to what.
Meaning fighting with the secular system? Or
No, fighting even with Judaism, with Torah. How could this be? How could that be?
So
a lot of unanswered questions, But then I had teachers who were so calm and so forgiving, so accepting of who I was and what my journey was, that it's something I fell in love with for the rest of my life.
Right. So it's the allowing yourself to have a choice in the searching and allowing yourself to have questions, and they allow that.
Exactly.
I think that's super, super. It becomes personal when I'm allowed.
Yes.
I guess that goes back to, when I asked you about acceptance and agreeing.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you disagree with me, you still allow me to have a choice. Maybe that's how God does it. Like the whole question of Yediyah and Bechira.
I would say
like how does God know and gives us a choice? Because
right.
it's not a contradiction.
Right.
It's only a contradiction in a very controlling, fearful environment. But in a place of love, of course there is knowing and doubting at the same time.
Right.
It's like it's not.
So this duality of the world is really where it's at. And I think when I made peace with it, somebody said, we were talking about the questions that we have about the world and all the whys. And they said, so down here, there are no answers, but up there are no questions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I really embraced that because it helped me to make peace with all the stuff that I can't possibly understand because I'm not infinite. I'm finite in this world. At some point, I look forward to being part of the infinite and finding answers. That'll be really cool.
Oh, wow. That's something. Thank you.
I'll send them down to you.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Okay.
But I guess in this world, our place is to have questions.
Exactly.
So to have a void is part of living. Exactly.
So again, it's all duality to embrace the low.
So if I don't have questions, there's a problem.
Right. That's right. Because it means you're not thinking. Right. And to be alive means to think and to question.
Right.
I would say.
Right.
I mean, that's the whole, how do people learn Gemara? Right.
It's
all questioning.
All of it is questioning.
Yeah.
And it seems like they weren't even looking for answers necessarily. They were looking for answers, but it isn't, the emphasis is on the question.
Yeah.
The emphasis is how good can I ask? How much can I ask?
And what does it mean, Shivim Panim L'Torah? How is that possible? 70 ways to approach Torah?
Torah is one, absolute.
Yeah.
So the answer is that it's 70 ways absolute.
Right.
It's 70.
Yeah.
That's how there's room for all of us in our different ways and different methods and different mindsets and different ways that work. Yeah.
That's why I really hate labels. Very, very much so. Even the personality type, I don't like to label. I let the person find out themselves that this is helpful.
And the person is the
Enneagram.
The Enneagram.
Or the Myers-Briggs, either of them. They're two very famous personality. So
I think
it's a jumping off point. That's all.
I think the Enneagram is based on a Sefer Kabbalah. I don't remember which one.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's one of the lost books of the Torah. That's the way I see it.
I can't remember like which literally book it's based off, which is really cool.
Well, look, Yaakov had 12 sons, and he gave them each a different bracha. Why? I think to point out that each one is such an individual and has their way.
Right.
So when you look at any system of like, this kind of a personality, it's simply for more self-awareness, which is the first A. It's more for self-awareness and for acceptance. Well, if this is me and the way that I was born, my nature, my nurture, here's where I need to go then to act in a positive way so that my life becomes productive.
Right. So the person that grew up from.
Well, unless they had
what's the...
Yeah, unless they had the
deal?
opportunity to explore and to ask and to grapple with things. Unless they had that opportunity, there's a lot of bitterness, a lot of resentment.
Right, and if it's not for them, it's for the people around them.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned. Like many times, it's not like something that works for me doesn't mean that it works. I could take a good look at the people around me and find out if it works or not. Mm-hmm. Like that keeps me in check. I know with my wife, it's like that. It's like it's really like, it works for me to do to so and so well. Does it work for my wife, for my kids, for my workers, for my circles? If the answer is no, probably there's something wrong with what I put out and the way I am. not wrong isn't, like something to look
But
at.
also it's, there's a question of values and how people, like what do people value most? Why do they value that? And where do these values come from? I think that's another very important part of this. Like you got married and had kids. Like why? Why is family a value?
You know what Shlomi told me, my 15-year-old? He said once a really good answer to this question. He said, if the purpose is living, then what makes sense is to create life.
Ooh,
if the only purpose in this life is to live, then what better way is there to live other than to create life?
Wow.
But it's a tough question. Like why create a family and life if there's so much hardship? And the more emotions there are, the more hard it feels or seems.
Right.
So it's like, what am I putting them through and why? So what's the answer? Why?
That Y is a crooked letter. How's that?
So again, it's a productive Y is check, but unproductive Y is like not helpful.
So again, if you ask within a framework, it's going to be a much more peaceful life than if you ask and there is no framework.
What do you mean?
So
if I ask,
to me, Yiddishkeit is a framework. We ask within the framework. We don't ask like as if there's no eternal values. Once you know that this is an eternal system, which it is, it's an eternal system, then the question is, how does that stem with me? How do I find my values within this framework that are eternal?
All right.
So if the Jewish...
And if it doesn't feel like mine, then there's probably a belief.
Right.
Or a
lack of education, usually. I mean, children are very often not taught to think. They're just taught to behave like robots or soldiers.
But I know why. Because they're just going to say no to things. I'm thinking of Yiddishkeit and system. I'm like, I can understand why they're told to think like robots because independence is scary to people.
Right. Choice. But if you
Giving a choice to a child is scary to people.
Okay, but certain choices you don't give to children. Like to go to the doctor or not, it's not their choice. It's your choice. So there are parent choices, there are kid choices, and then there are joint choices. And when you come from that point of view, it's not wrong of you to impose your mature choices on a child because when you have a mature brain, which takes 20 to 25 years, then you're going to use your mature brain because the kid is really, again, it takes a while for the brain to mature. So the child is not ready to make a choice.
Right. Besides the ones that they're ready. So if I present them with the amount of choice, I guess it works with everyone. If I present a person with the amount of choice they need or deserve or can handle, then there's a good amount of imposing that's safe to do.
Correct.
Which is why you can tell me off sometimes. Right? Or tell me like, yeah, that's just nonsense. Right? Because you've demonstrated or given me so much choice. So I guess it's a balance of these two. Last thing I was going to ask, more I think worth talking about is mind body. How does it work? Because a lot of the tools that I hear or what you say is like, okay, you think different and then things will change, or like words. It's so much in the mind, like words and thoughts.
The words are muscles. Think of the words. This is really more action. This is more thinking. This is much more action because each word, each dibur means something, right?
Like it's a part of creation. Like it's something happens when I move because there's an action.
And if not, then we're in the midbar.
Got it.
I just want to throw that in. It's really annoying, I know, but...
Yeah, it's great.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fun.
So the dibur is a muscle. We have control over muscles. So you can either yell and scream, or complain or whatever, or you can know that this can be very holy. The words can be very holy. And then the action obviously can either be, again, the world of duality. We have a choice. Here's where we have a choice. I could change one thought. Like as I was driving here, I started getting anxious thoughts. Okay, and I just stopped. I mean, I didn't stop the car, but I stopped and I said, okay, let's take another thought now.
Anxious thoughts about the podcast?
Yeah.
I'm glad we did it today.
Yeah. That's why I didn't want to put it off. It was glad. Like going to the doctor or something. Right. We could just get the shot and okay. Okay, so I changed the thought. aware, very aware, because I've done this for 40 years. I changed one thought. I changed my dibur. I started talking about maybe it'll be fun. I'm curious to see how it goes. And I'm giving myself credit for doing something that I normally would not do.
Right.
And then the action is like not grip the steering wheel, but just kind of relax, just to listen and to breathe. Because mind, body, we can't separate them. And we have all these wonderful books now about, the body awareness, and the body speaks, and the body doesn't lie, and all that. It's wonderful.
Titles,
yeah, titles again. Just knowing that if you neglect one part, the mind, the heart, or the body, it's not going to work.
So the work is on all
three.
And either, like either and all.
Right. And structure for all three. So structure could be regular exercise.
I told my gym trainer today.
Yeah.
I mentioned, you came up and I told him that you're the type of therapist that after 4 or 5 sessions, you just tell your client, go get in the gym and then call me again.
Right.
He loved it as a gym trainer.
Good. Okay.
He says, because you gotta have your something, right? You gotta have your something. And I'm like,
exactly
that's right.
You gotta have
I'm like,
your
you're the
something.
type of therapist that after 4 or 5 sessions, you're like, gym and then call me again.
Or I ask people to write out an example every day. Just come with 7 written examples how you've gone from the lower brain to the higher brain, according to the whole Emmett method. And when they bring me examples, I say, well, how was this for you? Oh, yeah, so I wasn't so anxious. I wasn't so depressed. I could see that I could move. That's the whole idea. But if you don't put it down on paper or your phone, if you don't actually do the physical, it doesn't tether the change of thought and speech to
the mind doesn't even get that something is changing. It doesn't even know that something is changing.
Right.
There's like a delayed response between whatever part of the brain it is, I guess the subconscious, for it to realize that I'm actually doing different.
Which next podcast we'll do on the non-dominant writing, because I love to do the non-dominant, because what it does is it actually accesses another part of your brain that's subconscious that you don't always recognize, but once you do, then the combination of left and right brain together is a very powerful
It's probably breath work accesses that too, right?
Absolutely. It's all the right side of the brain.
Right.
The left side is we'll call it the school brain, the rote brain, what you do.
The left side of the brain is my right hand.
That's your right hand. That's right. And that's why.
Doing.
That's right.
And the left is being, because it literally can do.
Correct.
That's so interesting.
I know.
It's pretty wild that we're like that. We literally have a doing hand and a being hand. Yeah. So the being can support the doing, but it can't do the way doing does.
Right, exactly.
Wow. Right. So mind, body, like you're always like into I think that yoga, one of the reasons you like about yoga is the breath that comes with it.
Exactly.
It's like that it takes a disciplinary breath in order to achieve certain movements.
Also, you can't do it like a robot. Yoga is very thoughtful. It's slow and it's thoughtful. Most people don't like slow and thoughtful. They like fast and action.
Right.
But that's why after my first yoga class, which by the way was on 9/11, that was my first yoga class.
Wow.
My class was supposed to be first class at 11 o'clock on that morning. I think it was a Tuesday. And by 8:30 in Chicago, what was happening in New York at 9:30 was known. And what am I going to go to a yoga class today? Maybe the world is falling apart and I'm going to go. That's so stupid. But by 11, I just needed to be with people and hear responses. So I went. There were about 6 women there. And I looked at the yoga teacher. I said, "You're really going to teach this class today?" She didn't say yes. She said, "Let's try."
Wow.
And I remember standing there and she was doing a silent meditation and the tears were dripping down my face. And then the next thing I knew, it was an hour and a half later.
Wow.
And I said, if there's something that could hold my attention on 9/11 for an hour and a half, I'm going to research this and get into it.
Wow.
And that was it. It was 20 years ago.
Wow. It's the slow and thoughtful. Mindful and slow.
Right. And being aware of a body. I didn't know that I existed from the neck down.
Wow.
I only knew that who cares? Sleep, eat, who cares? It's not important. And then it took me a long, long time, probably a good 40 to 50 years to understand the importance of the body.
What is the important? How does it play a role? Because there's so much ahead, methods and work and therapies and therapizing, and then there's a body that just drags along with all of it.
Unless you give it prime importance, to eat right, to sleep right. So these were things like, oh, this is just part of the Gashmias world, and I don't have to do that. I could exist on 2 or 3 hours of sleep, or I don't really have to. I could skip meals. I could do whatever I want. So it's not honoring the body. And if this is the vessel that God gave us to put this neshama into, then we have to really give it the importance.
And there's so much parts of the body that hold so much. Like there's the gut, and there's the heart, and there's like very, very physically, like so much of thought work is somatic. It's in the body. So the way I feed it, the way I move it, the way I breathe in will have an effect on.
So very often I try to approach a client even just from where is it hurting in the body, instead of starting with the head and talking about something. What's the body saying?
Right.
And the body talks really loud.
Right. Yeah, we're structured like our physical structure is a story. Like that's pretty obvious sometimes. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's deceiving, just like looks or a body structure. But it's always like when listening, it's always literally our makeup, the way we were built is so, and even inherited. Like my father was that type and I look exactly like him, and that person is this way and I look, it's so interesting. So a lot of the work, a lot of the, I guess, solutions is in the body. It's like the way I treat my body will have a lot to do with the way, with what goes into my head too, and what I allow in and what I don't allow in, and my ability to endure and take. And yeah, which is why the Wim Hof method is so powerful. Cold. It's so powerful because if I can say that I'm okay and actually get into 30 degrees ice and actually be okay and not become hypothermic, that's something. That's what he says. That's what Wim Hof says, that he was depressed. When he figured out that he can do this, then what else does my mind? And it's
it begins to open up the picture.
Yes. Thank you. This was excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.